Welcome to 5 on the Go, the ultimate career development podcast, created for students learning to uncover their career paths. Our guest, Adam Rodricks, can relate to feeling lost about your degree and your career direction. In this episode, he'll share his unconventional path, when it's okay not to have a plan, and how to master the art of storytelling in interviews. Plus, discover the inside story behind his best-selling book, Trigger Fingers. This is 5 on the Go, where your career journey never stops, and neither do we. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of 5 on the Go. Today, we have a very special guest. But before I reach out and kind of share who you are, I think, Adam, it's best that our audience gets to know you and who you are. But Adam, welcome back to University of Toronto. We're so happy to have you. Adam, can you take a few moments to introduce yourself, who you are?
Absolutely, Jay. Thank you for having me, by the way. It's always a pleasure to be back on campus. For those of you who I haven't had the pleasure of meeting yet, my name is Adam Rodricks. I am a 2010 alum of the University of Toronto, graduate of a BBA. I am now the National Director of Social Growth and Experience at KPMG in Canada, a best-selling author of Trigger Fingers, and I released my first TED Talk last summer.
So, Adam, thank you so much. You're always so willing to come back to the University of Toronto, connect with our students, engage with them, and things like that. But it took a bit of your own sort of settling down in your student career to get to where you're at today. Can you talk to us a little bit about how did you get your start?
Yeah, I don't want to get it twisted. You know, as a student, a lot of people look back on that journey and they say it was methodical, you had it all figured out.
Right.
To be clear, I did not have it all figured out. Right. What I did was I invested in my experience here, and I mean that in terms of on campus, beyond just the classroom,
right,
to expose myself to as many things as possible.
Right.
And then I applied that to my career. I don't want people to hear that and think he applied it to his job in a set path. That's not what I did, because I would say much of what I learned here was as applicable to my philanthropic endeavors, to my entrepreneurial efforts, to a number of other things. That scansion behind you just fell and it was pretty funny, but I'm just going to keep going. These were things that I thought, I think everybody applies them to their jobs, but for me it was equally beneficial to think more broadly about where the world is going, especially as it pertains to digital.
Right. And so can you take us back to 2010 and sort of which program were you in? And then from there, talk to us about the Staples story.
Yeah. Staples.
And we're going to do a little bit of storytelling throughout this whole conversation, because I think that's really the key theme that I would love for you to share with all of our listeners. It's the art of storytelling. But help us talk, if you could help us go back in time and talk to us about your time at U of T, which program you were in.
Yeah.
And then the first start at Staples and kind of some of the things you did thereafter.
Yeah, for sure. So I was at the University of Toronto Scarborough campus. I'm Scarborough born and raised and very proud of it, if you can't tell.
Awesome.
I'm a graduate of the management program. I had a specialization in marketing, and I also graduated with an English literature minor.
Okay.
I wrote my last exam on a Friday in August at U of T, and I started at a major bank in communications on the Monday.
Okay.
Unfortunately for me, that was working in traditional marketing, so I was sending out direct mail to credit card holders. It was a really, really slow pace, and I started to think to myself, is this what it's going to be like in marketing? Have I made a huge mistake? And, lucky for me, I didn't give up on it altogether. And that really changed when I started to invest in my personal brand. So I started a video game blog because, video game blog, those were my two passions in life, Jason,
awesome.
Video gaming and writing, right?
What were you playing in 2010?
Oh my gosh, great question. So in 2010, wow, if I think about what I was playing, I've always been a Nintendo head my entire life.
Yeah.
So I was playing a lot of Wii games at the time, was kind of the big craze.
Yeah.
So I was playing the latest Zeldas, Mario Galaxy, and I wanted to write about them, not just because I loved these games and I wanted to talk about the reviews and what was worth your time, but I wanted to talk about what was worth your money.
Interesting.
And that was an interesting mechanism through which I built trust with Canadians.
Right.
And this thing sort of snowballed, and it actually did get the attention of some major employers, one of whom called me for an interview. And I mean, Jason, think back to 2010, right? As a student, I was told that I would have to apply for jobs and then I would get none of them, right? Like that's how I was told this would go.
Yeah.
And here I am getting sought out for something because of my portfolio.
Right.
And that's the first time I even heard my little rinky-dink blog being referred to as something that was conducive to getting a job.
Right.
So it was crazy. They called me up. It was obviously, a pretty warm intro given that they sought me out.
Okay.
And lo and behold, I got that job and started there.
That's amazing. And so let's continue that journey.
Yeah.
Because at some point also you started working at Staples. Would that be correct?
Yeah.
And let's talk about some of the initiatives you took with Staples and probably getting recognized right at the top of this level. Is that even a real thing? The top level of Staples. How did that story come about, and what was that all about?
Yeah, fantastic organization that really, allowed me to take the reins of their social platforms at a time when the industry itself was at its infancy.
Right.
There wasn't really, in terms of corporate Canada, a template as to what we're supposed to be doing from a brand perspective on social. And it was such a fantastic learning ground for me because the leadership was so supportive. They allowed me to go out and try things. It began with proof of case internally in terms of cultivating a community. So this was within our four walls. I was working strictly in an internal communications capacity.
Right.
And then because the leaders believed in what we were doing, they allowed me to flip the script. And that led to the career that I know and enjoy now in social media.
Interesting. So it's really interesting how you've talked about, well, I didn't know everything.
Yeah.
When I was going through my 4-year journey in Scarborough, how you took the opportunity to start writing and blogging about video games. You were sought after. You started recognizing there was something called a portfolio, and then you started building your personal brand. Adam, I'd really like to learn from you and understand from you, when should a student really know who they are?
Yeah.
Is it like, when should they actually know that they've chosen the right educational path, where you've alluded to, like, you questioned yourself, did I take the right program? Or even from your professional journey, at what point should a student or a new graduate know they've made it?
Yeah. To be clear, I still don't know, right? But when we talk about something as defined as an educational path, the decision making, I can still channel that 17-year-old Adam way back when I was thinking about where to go and what to study, and it came down to two things. Institution-wise, U of T, because there is a world-renowned reputation for what this is, and I'm very blessed as a public speaker. I get to go all over the world, and very often people will approach me afterwards and they'll say, well, where did you go to school?
Right.
And I could be on a completely different continent, and when I say University of Toronto, there's recognition there. Often it's met with, oh, wow, right? Or, oh, I understand the caliber with which you're bringing in, that makes sense to me that you went to U of T. And then the second thing was the degree that I chose to study. I chose business because of the versatility of it. I didn't necessarily know exactly what I wanted to do. I always thought that I wanted to work in marketing or advertising, but that's because of trivial reasons. Like, I like the show Mad Men, right? I didn't really have any working experience yet, so I wanted to keep my options open, and a business degree enabled me to do so.
I find it very compelling to speak to alumni like yourself. There's a few folks that I've spoken to where they're on their educational journey, and halfway through they realize, this is not me.
Yeah.
Sort of like what you had stated earlier. I recently spoke to a alum who was in their 4th year of biology, and they took a minor in their 4th year in history, and they had a lot of writing to do. And it opened up to them that, you know what? Health and life science is not for me, but I love writing. And realized later that becoming a lawyer, where, believe it or not, unlike what Hollywood shows you, 80% of it is writing.
Yes.
Went on to law school. What kind of advice do you have for current students who may not know if what they're taking currently is the right path? Like, are there ways that you can turn this around? Like, how does that work for you, or your experiences speaking with others that you talk to on a day-to-day basis?
Definitely. Jason, when I think about it, I go, treat business like dating. And a lot of students look at that and they go, well, how do you mean? And I say, even those things that we try that aren't necessarily going to end up being our job or our career, it's like a bad first date. there's always something that you can take from it, right? Often those are traits on a date of someone that you know are not good things in a partner that you want. The same is true for jobs, right? We will do a job and realize, you know what, this is not fast-paced enough, or I love the role, but I don't love the sector within which I work, right? So take from each thing nuggets, and what you'll find is that you're actually building quite a profile of what your ideal job or career path looks like. And it's not completely unlike finding a partner in life.
Right. I love that final example there. You know, when we look at your career path and where you're at today, it's phenomenal. I just want to say congratulations, hearing your story and seeing where you're at today.
Thank you.
But I think one of the most important and compelling attributes that I've come to know about you is your art of storytelling. And I'm just curious to find out, maybe if there was something that helped you, or maybe you had a mentor, or maybe just out of sheer practice, you learned how to storytell. And I think our viewers and listeners would also like to learn the art of storytelling. So can you take a few moments maybe to talk about your own journey in the art of storytelling and maybe how people can learn how to do it themselves?
Absolutely. So there are some, and I'm sure everyone knows one in their life, there are some people who are just born great storytellers.
Right.
I am not one of them. For me, it really came down to practice what I was doing, and to write well in terms of storytelling, I had to read more of what I wanted to replicate. So for me, a lot of what I do is I pick up books and I just completely devour them. And through that, I learn how to make my writing punchy, to ensure that you are hanging on my every word, and to be quite frank, that you actually care about getting to the end of a story. Because what I find, especially in corporate Canada, is many people don't sell us on the why I should care. And if you don't do that, you're going to have a bad time.
So do you think there's a formula to storytelling? Is there something, you said you've read a number of books. So are those fiction, nonfiction, and did you discover a formula? Is there a formula that you rely on, that you know it helps you in bringing out that story?
Yeah, I think in the context of my keynote speeches, definitely.
Okay.
I've learned through practice. I've learned through, much like a comedian will bomb on stage and realize that joke didn't work.
Right.
I'll realize that certain parts of a story don't work, or perhaps the way I've positioned it don't work. It's a lot harder when we're looking at a book, where I have to have that voice come through pages. And we know with attention spans today, we know with just the overabundance of information that's available, that's a really tall ask of someone, especially a student who's got required reading that they've got to do, and then this is supposed to be something that they're doing on their side recreationally. It better be good.
Speaking of storytelling, I think we've come to that point where this book has been sitting in front of me for quite a while. Congratulations on Trigger Fingers.
Thank you.
This has become a New York Times bestseller. You were there number 7, I believe, on the top spot. Talk to us a little bit about how this came to be, why you built the opportunity to write this book, Trigger Fingers, and what is the audience going to learn by investing in a book like Trigger Fingers?
Yeah, so when this started, I mean, I look at this thing and there are days I can't believe I even hold it in my hand and that it exists, right? What it's done, I'm so grateful for, but the fact that it actually exists, there are so many people who begin books and just never finish them.
Right.
And going around and getting to meet other people, that was probably the thing that bubbled up. People telling me, I want to do this thing. And it doesn't happen overnight, right? It's steady, small momentum steps that you take to eventually get here. When the pandemic hit, I really looked at my bucket list, and Jason, I had a sulk fest, because so much of what I have on my bucket list is experiential, right? I had jump out of a plane, visit Japan, go to the wizarding world of Harry Potter. Like, these are real things from that list. And I couldn't do it. COVID took that away from me.
Right.
And as my eyes went to the bottom of that list, I saw write a book. And I started to reframe my thinking in my Sulk Fest around the idea that, okay, the pandemic has taken certain things away from me, but it's actually given me something, and that thing is an abundance of time. I may not have time in droves like this to put pen to paper and think about putting something together. So I began in 2020, kind of looking at my keynote talks, what had resonated with my audience, tons and tons of blog posts, and, 56 months later, there was a book, and I'm just so pleased with how it's been received. Yeah.
So what will somebody take away from Trigger Fingers? it is about personal branding.
Yeah.
But is there one major takeaway or two major takeaways that you would like to share with our audience?
Yeah.
So that they get to know a little bit about Trigger Fingers and why you wrote this compelling book about personal branding.
For sure. So Trigger Fingers is comprised of 18 anecdotes from my life and career that teach personal branding through stories.
Okay.
And I think most of the commentary, most of the reviews that have come back favorably have said, never did I think I was going to learn the fundamentals of personal branding, which is supposed to be, for lack of a better word, boastful, through 15 self-deprecating stories. Like, these are not stories of when I did right.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important for the student audience to understand that the missteps, the failures were as important to success as the times I got it right. That's really what this book was supposed to be about. And I'm so happy that so many people saw themselves in their own stories within these pages.
That is awesome. Adam, what's next for you from a professional front, maybe from a personal front? What's next in your life, and where do you see, are there more things on your bucket list you're trying to hit out? Love to hear a little bit about that as well.
Yeah. And I would save this love for U of T, Jason, to say I haven't been able to talk about it publicly for some time now, but there is a second book.
Oh, wow. Okay. Amazing.
There is a second book. We will call it Trigger Fingers Part 2 as a working title, but it's not Trigger Fingers Part 2.
Okay.
This particular book I'm very excited about.
Okay.
It's not stories from my career, but it's the stories from Canadian leaders across the country. Wow. Not the stories that that had them ending up as CEOs and in boardrooms.
Right.
These are the stories about their most intimate failures, things that you would never associate with the upper echelon, the 1%. And it just means so much that they've been able to share these stories with me in good confidence and trust me to bring them to life in a way that's not going to make them look like they're incompetent or they didn't have it all figured out. But I think that's really what these books come down to. It's that you don't need to necessarily have it figured out, but you do have to try. You do have to put yourself out there.
I love it. I can't wait for this to come out. I think that's a great way for students and other readers alike to learn from seeing what others tried to do and use it as a stepping stone to build their own future careers and opportunities. Adam, last but not least, if our followers want to continue following you on socials or other places, what's the best way to stay in touch with you or get to hear news about Trigger Fingers and possibly Trigger Fingers 2? What's the best way for people to stay in touch with you? Yeah,
I would say if you Google me and you can't find me, I'm not very good at this job, so I should probably come back to U of T and figure out what my next step is. But I'm at Adam Rodricks on everything. I'm most active, of course, on LinkedIn. It's the place where I try to help most of our students as well. I'm also fairly active on Instagram and Facebook, so I post what's going on with my speaking. I post about the TED Talk, the book development, so would love to be connected to anybody who wants to follow along on the journey.
Awesome. Adam, thank you so much for your time. Once again, welcome to this amazing event that we're having here today, and so glad to have you back on campus. Spend some time with us through this conversation.
Thank you so much. I'm going to walk the show floor. I actually brought a couple resumes, so I might drop them off before I leave, if that's okay.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Adam.
Thank you.